All right. Well, we are here. We are back to talk about some JonCon. So this one turned out better than I thought it would. I thought it was going to be just kind of preparing for the battle, but it actually ended up, a lot more emotional. I felt a lot more for JonCon. I'm really liking him as a character now. But starting with the title, John. Um, a lot of people really liked the fake out. I'm glad it really went well. I going into this, none of the sample chapter, none of the submitted chapters had gone with John as the name, and I was leaning towards calling the chapter John the Clever. It started out with just this idea that Jon Con was being like Lan the Clever and trying to, take Storm's End with trickery. But when I finally finished putting together the chapter, and I came up with the idea of the Rhaegar poetry line at the end, or not line, but a couple paragraphs, and so I became really attached to that idea. Actually, like, oh, John the Clever at the end, like the whole time you think it's about him taking Storm's End, and in the end, it's actually about him feeling sad that that his poem or the song that Rhaegar wrote for him died at the Trident and things like that. But the other editors kind of said, well, if you're gonna, really just John based on the opening, like just fits better. And I mulled it over and I said, you got to be bold. You got to be bold. George R. R. Martin is bold in his writing, and I think that's the big mistake a lot of people do when they think about the rest of the story, is that they don't go bold enough, and they think about everything as a traditional fantasy story. And so, if we're really going bold, like the boldest thing you can do is say, you know what? No, the John chapters are Jon Cons, not Jon Snow's. But and so yeah, let's just call it John. Let's go with the because I was kind of thinking John the Clever would keep people fooled a bit longer than something else like Connington, or the Gray Hand or something. But so yeah, it worked. People were still fooled, even though like I had told everybody that a John Con chapter is coming, but they were still fooled when they saw John. And so this beginning I had planned for a while. This you know I see you've come back from the grave, but Rhaegar's son. The editors helped wordsmith this quite a lot better. But this was always kind of my idea that there would be this confusion right from the beginning, that Jon Con coming back from the grave, but and fooling people. This kind of like the prologue, and then it just kind of grew. The idea is that, oh wait, the flexing the fingers of the sword hand, which is the that idea came along, and with referring to the it eventually becomes like a mantra. Early so Jon Snow is always flexing the fingers of his sword hand. The actual language, John flex the fingers of his sword hand, like becomes rather repetitive in Dance with Dragons. Though in the previous books it's not, but we went with the Dance with Dragons like repetition. This next line, actually, you're stubborn as an oryx. This is some foreshadowing about what's going to happen at the battle, but it's also originally I had used like you're as stubborn as an ox, but you're stubborn as an oryx is actually like a Robert line. And so the idea is that Jon Con hates Robert, but they both grew up, they're both from like the Stormlands. They might use the same language. So in the end, we just went with the Robert line. You're stubborn as an oryx. And I guess for the battle, they're not going to be just using oxen. They're going to be using all sorts of different beasts of burden. And so there's little things here. I needed to include. I wanted to include a trestle table, which was kind of similar to Stannis in the North, because he's just sitting at a trestle table when talking to Theon in the Crofters' village. And then there was, oh, man, we went through a lot of discussion over like how much feeling would be in Jon Con's hand. We decided that there needed to be more progression. Like every time you update on Jon Con, he needs to be feeling less and less. You can't just have him not feeling his fingertips. He's got to be even more. So this has his whole hand feeling numb. But who knows on the morrow, maybe dead again. And then we get to Mathis Rowan. Now it's a fan theory that Mathis Rowan is the one like left behind at Storm's End. I think it's a probable fan theory. Essentially, early in the book, you hear about Lord Mathis and Mace Tyrell going to Storm's End for the second siege of Storm's End, and then Mace Tyrell shows up in the epilogue, having returned to King's Landing. So, it makes sense that Mathis Rowan is left behind. So he seems to be the character that you'd have, and so, we go with Mathis being there. And then Jon Con, plate of food, full and inviting. This gets into George R. R. Martin food porn. The fact that he has a steak and that he's eating a steak is, very similar to Daenerys, the Daenerys chapter that we wrote where she's eating a steak. And then we wanted a few things that like the Golden Company needs a lot of good fortune in order to take over, and so like coming across like more fruits and vegetables and supplies, and just like it was for that. It's for so that, but also like having their herds graze right outside the castle. You're getting more pack animals, which is foreshadowing of what's to come. And then a little reference to a harvest festival, which we experienced in the Bran chapters. And so then we have the just a little background on what happened. Like this isn't necessary so much, but this is the first chapter of a book. You have to have some summary of like what exactly is going on. Let's see here. And so we hear about Mace Tyrell leaving Storm's End and leaving Mathis Rowan behind and stuff like this. And then reference back to the various rumors that Arianne was experiencing, and so you find out that Jon Con has been putting out these rumors intentionally. And then the dipped banners to it's funny, there's a large discussion on how do people surrender to each other in Westeros. Do you use the peace banner, the rainbow banner, or like what exactly do people say? And it apparently, like, because they don't have white flags, right? Like how exactly does one surrender in Westeros? And the only thing we could find is that they dip banners. So dipped banners is the way to surrender apparently in Westeros. So the Golden Company, again, coming across all of these like lucky things, getting more horses, getting mangonels, the mangonels which are going to be used later on in the battle. And then this was a very late edition. It was mainly just that this paragraph wasn't long enough, so I decided to add a little more things that they won there, because it just seemed weird to have just the sentence of like, oh, they won with hundreds of horses, dozen mangonels, and provisions, and the greatest prize was the Lord of Golden Grove. Let's have a few more. Let's make this paragraph longer. So we have in and again, we were just throwing in characters, Black Balak and Humphrey Stone and Watkin. But the idea is that the houses from the Sworn Sword are actually sworn to House Rowan. So this is a perfect time to like give a shout out to House Weber and House Osgray. And so you have the spiderweb brooch and the armor of the Checky lion. So I was like, what would an old great house, a house that was super great but now really poor, what would they have? They wouldn't have a Valyrian sword, but maybe we could give them a Valyrian steel dark. Some prize. If the house somehow survived the sworn sword, because Eustace Osgray was an old guy. Maybe he was able to have a kid with Weber. And then we needed a third thing because you have a series, so it's like I chose House Blackbar because maybe we're gonna have something with regards. The Blackbars are married into House Tyrell, so maybe we might do something interesting with this Blackbar prisoner. And then the new blade made breastplate that's very similar to Tyrion trying to get a new breastplate from likely the perfumed hero who dies in the Tyrion sample chapters. Anyway, so Storm's End yields. Rowan doesn't believe him, and then he says that yesterday you have the strength of Sunspear. That's obviously referring to them thinking they have Dorne and Arianne. And then the day before he boasted the Castellan of Harrenhal. That's Bonifer Hasty that we mentioned in the Elaine 2 chapter that we wrote, and then next week all the Seven Kingdoms, and I'll be the last one to pledge. And then we get him, saying, "Oh, look for yourself and look at the banners." And this is a reference to Arianne, like not it being this idea introduced in the Arianne sample chapters that the Golden Company's golden banners look the same as the Lannister. I mean, not the Lannister, the Baratheon banners. The wood beneath our gold is stronger than your gilded rust. We actually went into had a discussion on whether the Golden Grove tree is gold all the way through, or if it's gold on top of wood. So I think it's supposed to be gold on top of wood, and so this is like, but these interesting, these little things that you end up talking about, and so, yeah, you see yourself a great trickster, Jon the Clever. And so this becomes Jon the Clever being introduced here and then coming back at the end of the chapter with like that name, Jon the Clever, like is going to be is secretly a real punch in the gut for JonCon, but you don't know it yet because you don't really know what it is. Jon the Clever, and he's like clever. So this is his hand itching beneath the glove, which is kind of a reference to Jaime. His fandom hand itches at various times. And then I liked this, the heart. Tell me what you see, a heart or a heart, because of course, like the Baratheon banner is the golden stag. A stag is a heart. They are synonymous. Weirdly, they use the heart when talking about a white hart at the beginning of a Game of Thrones. That might be killed for it being fortuitous for Joffrey rising, or for Joffrey's name day or something, him being the heir. This is something borrowed for House of the Dragon, but weirdly, heart isn't used very often. But I thought it was clever here, a heart or a heart. The heart being the burning heart of Stannis versus a heart being the House Baratheon. So he's kind of saying like, well, okay, really, like it's a Baratheon banner. Which Baratheon banner? Well, clearly he can't tell, because he's lying that he can tell it's a Baratheon banner. The golden flags were wet and limp, bogged down for the thick raw fog rolling in off Shipbreaker's Bay. And so I thought this was a clever idea that the reason JonCon knows and can formulate this whole plan is he knows when the White Raven came that there would be fog, because this is part of being a Stormlander. About the Winter's Broom. Broom is, what's weird, George doesn't actually use broom. It's a beautiful word, broom, for mist and fog, but he doesn't use it. But it was such a beautiful word that I thought he should, So the Winter's Broom. the winter's fog. Um, and so there's some discussion here. So Lord Mathis now squinted as he looked up to Storm's End. Discussion of like where they are in their camp and how far they are from the walls. Like when you say you're beneath the walls of Storm's End, does that mean they're like very close? How close are you? Things like this. Which direction? But there's some debate on whether or not Mathis is questioning himself. And then this line, only a fool would believe you could take such a stronghold. We will see who is a fool. There's a lot of people that could be, but does it mean Ariane? Does it mean Tyrell forces coming south? Does it mean Mathis? So there's a lot of things on who's a fool for not knowing who the banners represent. And then this is the spare a thought for your lady wife. This is important because Rowan married a red wine. This red wine is actually the same red wine girl that the Blackfish was supposed to marry, but then turned down for mysterious reasons. But she's an important character. We just don't kind of know how. But I think she's important in that she's going to pull the red wines into an alliance. But he mentions singers, and Mathis Rowan says, I loathe singers. This is a reference to the fact that Darian, the singer, was caught abed with Mathis Rowan's daughter. We're not sure, and he was sent to the wall for rape, even though Darian claims that it was consensual sex. And I actually tend to agree. Like, had it actually been rape, they probably would have killed Darian or at least gelded him. But instead, they sent him to the wall. So I think it was. My opinion is that he's innocent. I think it's a better story that he's innocent and that Arya killed an innocent man. I mean, he may be a dickhead, but he's innocent. And then we get some background on numbers of forces, just because this is going to come into place. This is the logistics that of how many horse and how many foot to make the battle work out. The cavalry rides. I doubt the foot soldiers have crossed the Wendwater. The Wendwater is a river that's about halfway between Storm's End and King's Landing, and Red Ronnet leads the van, which is something that's it's mentioned in the Arion sample chapters, that there's these rumors that Ronnet is heading south. Plus he appears in like the epilogue, and so it makes sense. And plot-wise, it's rather important that Red Ronnet is this guy with a temper, that JonCon is taking advantage of that temper. The singers are quite good, I hear, at the wall. Like, this is, because he sent Darian there, so. And then JonCon is going to use Red Ronnet's temper. Now, I will say it's a bit of a shift in JonCon's character. When he first arrives at Griffin's Roost, he's quite relieved that Ronnet isn't there because he doesn't want to be a kinslayer. But so we had to make the change happen to him during the chapter. So we go into that a bit. Jon the Clever, Jon the Butcher, Jon the Kinslayer. So then Rowan made a disgusted noise and looked back to the tent. I thought the company's banners were colorful. A destrier with dragon wings. That was Bittersteel Sigil. That is Bittersteel Sigil, because he has dragon wings on the horse of Bracken. And then Mathis says, a shame flying horses would be something new. This is some foreshadowing of things to come, both in Ariane's chapter and in the second JonCon chapter. But if you read the summaries, you kind of know what I'm talking about. But the flying horses is something that's going to happen twice, and it's some foreshadowing that was shoved in there. They were done for today. You may find us entertaining. We mummers tend to be. This is a reference to the Mummer's Dragon. The Mummer's Dragon, of course, at the House of the Undying, Dany sees a dragon on poles, and she calls it the Mummer's Dragon. And then I think Quaithe talks about a Mummer's Dragon as well. But everybody's like, what does that mean? Like, is it who's the mummer? Well, JonCon is the mummer. It's the Mummer's Dragon, So JonCon summoned the guards, take him away, and then he has his hand, and he starts saying during the battle. So JonCon plans on chopping off his own hand during the battle somehow. In which he speaks of in the Griffin Reborn chapter that he wants to take it off, but he'd be like, how is that believable? Wouldn't everybody be like, how'd you lose your hand? This is a perfect opportunity for him. He has to be thinking about this being an opportunity to take his hand off. But of course, there's also I haven't fully decided if he's gonna take it. He might chicken out, but even if he does take his hand off, Tyrion specifically said in Dance with Dragons that many people chop off their hand only to have the grayscale appear on the other hand. Okay, so then we get Casper Hill, and a description of him physically. We just went with Miko, the Miko artist, drew pictures of Casper Hill and Duncan Strong, and it's like, why not use his descriptions or how he drew them? It makes no difference, really. So but yeah, they come in with their lens and their manure. And the reason we chose Duncan Strong and Dennis Strong, well, is that they were brothers, and so you can have something about, you can meet Duncan and infer things about Dennis, but also the Strongs were connected to the Citadel in Lionel Strong studied at the Citadel, and so this idea that a Strong would be studying at the Citadel is kind of a reference to Lionel Strong. And then let's see, she's also like the mummery of Laurie Strong and things like this. So then, what of the Dornish princess? She's in a Mirish cog with Duncan's brother. This is a reference to the cog is going to be Morash the Mirman, who's going to appear in the Arion chapter. But just because Morash is just a random character who appeared with Stannis, he was a nobody, minor character, but it's like, why not bring him back? He it's an excuse for somebody to know Storm's End. We just kind of, we know that Stannis hires these Mirish cell sails. Most of their ships get crashed during the Battle of the Blackwater, and then they're never talked of ever again. So it's like, why not bring him back? So it would make sense that this guy would get hired and has been into Storm's End, and so it's like, that's why she's on a Mirish cog. A lot of people put that, shouldn't they be using the Estermont ships, and they wrote stuff them being on an Estermont ship. And, that makes sense, but I don't know. I guess it just weighed that I like Morash the Mirrormen coming back. Weirdly, there's a city called Morash in Ice and Fire as well. I don't know why, but they're completely unrelated. And then we get the Storm's End cave, which is of course like the one that Davos goes in, and the delay happening, the cell sails. Like, he told the cell sails to miss the early rising because he wants them to arrive as late as possible, because he's trying to get them to be in a certain place at dawn, which is why at the end of the chapter he says, at dawn all eyes will be upon us. So we do a little explanation that there's two tides a day, and so we use Duncan as the one that kind of knows it, and says that, oh, he was very impressive, so Dennis is going to be similar. We're introducing this idea that they studied at the Citadel for Dennis Strong's mummery next in the Arion chapter. But this is all kind of foreshadowing its setup for that. Must go from back to the cliffs. It's gonna be Stark soon. The fog is heavy. Smell of shit. This is all foreshadowing of all of the animals being out there, and mention of the aurochs and the oxen and the animals grazing, and all the animals that they were stealing in the Arion sample chapters. This is all being foreshadowed actually quite a bit of what Jon Con's plan is. And then we have this, Jon Con having some doubt about should we have waited. And so then we go back. Now, it's been a fortnight since Princess Arion Martell. I actually screwed up. But the truth was actually better. I screwed up in that I thought Arion took 5 days to go from Mistwood to Griffin's Roost. It turns out she takes 8. And the reason I was confused is that they only talk about the story for 5 days. But at the very beginning, it says it was an 8-day trip. And it's just that nothing happened the last 3 days. And so I got confused. Anyway, it was 8 days. So there was even more time which is good, because that means that gives Red Ronnet more time, a more realistic time to get down to Storm's End, and it gives Jon Con more time chilling out, waiting for them, observing them coming in. So it works out. It turns out it is a fortnight essentially from Ghost Hill, from Arion going from Ghost Hill to her getting to Storm's End. And so how do we make that happen? Well, Lyson Omar could have an informant at Ghost Hill. Arion they made a show of themselves at Ghost Hill. If you remember, they were racing through the streets on horses. And it was, I wanted to kind of have for such a secretive mission, they were being pretty ostentatious at Ghost Hill. So this is the result. And so, yeah, if you find out that Arion Martell is coming, you would have another meeting. That's an important piece of information. So we go back to have another council meeting, even though they just had one a few days prior. And so then we get to, people arguing about this. And so, and what they would be arguing about, are the Dornish really supporting us? Why are their armies sitting idle? And then Dick Cole. Somebody I never realized this until writing this, that one of the editors pointed out, because they thought I'd come up with the name Dick Cole, but I hadn't. But I'd never thought that Dick Cole, it's George making a pun, Dick Hole, but he's calling him Dick Cole. It had never occurred to me that Dick Cole was Dick Hole. It's kind of other shit, it's George's sense of humor, but here he is, Dick Hole. Anyway, Franklin Flowers being the guy with the most character in this scene. He is really the most interesting. There is a shift in, they'll be disappointed, said Raleigh Duckfield. He must wait for the Dragon Queen. Raleigh's personality is actually a little different here, but I think it's the idea that he's now a Kingsguard and he's acting more appropriate, that he's trying to fill the station that he has. But Raleigh was previously not a very professional kind of guy, but now he's trying to fill the role here. But yeah, he considers himself Lord Commander, and so because even though he's the only person on the Kingsguard, so. And then, so then I thought this was kind of funny, thinking about it, what would the Golden Company think of her party? And they're like, well, the only person I've noticed is Lady Bright. And you're like, Jane Lady Bright, who is practically an invisible character in the Arion sample chapters. She essentially vomits and on the ship and has no other role. I don't think does she even have any lines? I don't even think she has any lines, but I almost felt like she needed some attention. Like they're all sitting there going like, Lady Bright, who the hell is this Jade Lady Bright? Like, and then, what they would think of a bastard girl with the name Elia and this guy that used to date Ariane Martel. They start getting all confusing because Ariane does call the Garibaldi shells and what was the other guy? I forgot for a moment, but they're both supposed to be supposedly dashing, and so she's coming. Her honor guard is 3 knights, all comely, one who's rumored to be her paramour, and so they're all kind of like, what's going on here? And so they I guess a lot of these ideas came from my analysis, my prepping for winter analysis as well, like her party and going through her party and what message it must send and what Doran Martell must have been thinking when he put it together. Anyway, so they're like, oh, so they discuss this a bit, and then originally when I put this together, almost all the editors unanimously were like, you can't have Aegon doing nothing. Like, Aegon needs to do something. And so it's like, okay. So we have Aegon do something, but then it's like, he's not doing enough. You can't have Aegon be less bold than he was in the Griffin Reborn chapter. We have to escalate it. And so it's like, okay, so we need to have... So Aegon, through drafts and rewrites, Aegon's role grew and grew. He went from being completely silent to being rather significant to the chapter. And so this idea that JonCon was actually like considering stopping and waiting, and it being like originally it was just going to be like, well, the ravens screamed march, and that was the end of the discussion. But it was like, no. It's got to be like the ravens screamed march, and Aegon is the one pushing it based on this raven message, because we need to escalate the sort of boldness and recklessness of Aegon. But yeah, so yeah, rightfully so. The editors, pushed that Aegon's part grow and grow and grow. And of course, him saying march, he's not saying march, he's saying marsh. I think some people, when they read it, were confused. They're like, I don't understand. This raven seems to be saying, exactly what it needs to say, like, for the moment. And it's like, no. The message is pretty clear. It's Jon, beware wine, beware marsh. That's its message. And it just has said different things at different times, out of order. And people interpret it different way. So like, Maester Jon just got beware Jon. And so he thought and then, obviously Jon, which Jon was it in the Elaine sample chapter? Jon, Redfort. He thought he got beware Jon, and then Darkstar got beware Jon, thinking it was Jon Connington, but then he got wine, and he thought it was like, feed it some wine, and he didn't get any, he got the wine, he got the bird drunk, but it didn't do anything else. So here, like, we get Jon March, beware, and then later beware wine, instead of beware March, but so Aegon's speech. So like I said, like, Aegon started out saying nothing, but then I was like, okay, we need to increase his influence here. And this paragraph is actually, the White Raven heralds the change of the seasons. Winter has returned to this land after many years, as has the Golden Company and the true King of Westeros. We are here to stay. That is a little joke. He said, we are here to stay. Aegon saying, Aegon means he and the Golden Company. But what he's accidentally said is that winter is also here to stay, as in the long night. This is this paragraph starts referencing in the Clash of Kings prologue a Patchface prophecy, where Patchface says, "The fools have come to dance, the fools have come to stay." I should really bring it up. And the shadows. Oh, that's it. The shadows, because like in the House of the Undying, a great beast of shadow like burns it, like spreads its flames, and the idea is that the shadow is a great stone beast spreads its shadow. So the great stone beast is grayscale in my interpretation of it. And so when Patchface says clever bird, clever man, clever fool. And so here he says, like, Aegon says the clever bird has the right of it, right? And then Jon the Clever is the clever man. And the shadows come dance, grayscale, my lord. Dance, my lord, dance, my lord. The shadows come to stay, my lord. Stay, my lord. Stay, my lord. So this, like, even though like originally Aegon had no speech or any words, like it fit really, really well. The fact that like we're already calling the chapter Jon the Clever, and you know, all we had to have, you know, and a white raven was showing up who was supposed to be a clever bird. So you're getting that same thing: clever bird, clever man, clever fool. Oh, clever fool! The shadows come to dance. And so this is where I get into this, like, this, we're no longer exiles. We're no longer some children. We've crossed the ocean to dance with swords, claim with birthright, rule with honor. So that's the thing, is they've come to stay. They've come to dance. That's all Patchface. And I expect no one to get that on the first read. Like, no one's gonna get that on the first read. But I'm just saying, like, that's all there. That's a Patchface. I am throwing a huge bone to Patchface with this paragraph. And then, you know, it's always bugged me, and it bugged a lot of people that after posting this, people are like, "Thank you. Why do they keep calling him Prince Aegon?" So I want to address why they were calling him Prince Aegon, and because there is a similar scene with Daenerys and Jorah Mormont where he calls her princess, and she says, "Why do you call me princess?" And he's like, "Sorry, Queen Khaleesi." You know, so it's kind of a call to that. Like, why are they still calling him Prince? So March. He's really saying Marsh. Bowen Marsh. Fortnight later. It was the going back and forth with the time skips were very confusing to the editors, so we have a lot of clarification on like when we're going back and forth in time. Probably more than George does, but we wanted to be clear. And then it kind of felt like Lady Lamore is not getting enough attention, so we get some mentions of like, and Varys doesn't get some attention. So was Lady Lamore right? A message from the god, another possibility of the spider. And so then Brendel Byrne comes in, and just kind of a lot of these are just shout outs to like people in the Golden Company. Somebody's got to come, and obviously these knights coming and going is very similar to Stannis with the knights coming and going, in the Theon sample chapter. So then we hear about the banners of Fossway, Crane, Oakhart, and Connington. Fossway, just because like Franklin Flowers is looking to kill some Fossways. I think it's actually going to be kind of funny if like he doesn't get to kill any Fossways. I think that's much funnier than him killing Fossways. Is him like just failing, like I feel like the Fossways are going to like surrender and join him, and he's going to have to like sit there and be angry that he's allied with Fossways the whole time and not get to kill any Fossways. But that's just kind of a funny joke in my head. I don't know how it'll actually turn out, but yeah, I felt like we needed some Reach people, Crane, Oakheart, and Connington for Red Ronnet. And then I think some people pointed out, like, shouldn't we really be talking about Randall Tarley too? It's like, yes. So Randall Tarley gets a shout out. And then we get the Peaks. I felt like the Peaks needed a little more attention, so we get a reference to their castles of Starpike, White Grove, and Dunsonbury, which is actually that all comes from the World of Ice and Fire. It's not actually in any. I don't think that's in any standard in the books, in the 5 books. But yeah, counting 50 generations of tradition, where Peaks could boasted, Connington boasted 50 generations of tradition. The Peaks could claim 500, going back to the dawn of days. So the Peaks are going to be uber proud. They're going to be uber proud, and they're going to be more important as time goes on. Mangonels have been moved. This is all getting into the battle. Of course, like, there's also trebuchets at the Battle of Fire that are going to have a certain effect on the battle. So I felt that, like, the Mangonels needed to be doing something. So we got the pitch ready. The bundles of sticks soaked in oil, and which are going to be, and then trumpets. One of the editors was actually a horn player, so there's some discussions about, like, keeping the lips buzzing. That's when horn players, like, are not playing, they actually, like, kind of keep moving their lips. They kind of buzz their lips in order to try to, like, keep them active in between, so that they never get kind of, like, stiff. But this is actually pretty important. The bold, strong blasts for Homeless Harry. This gets into the elephants and some foreshadowing. That's what's going to be happening here. But that's what we need. And then we have the request for wine, for courage, and then the beware, and we go back. And this is the thing, is we really need to go back and show how Connington went from not wanting to kill Ronnet and being glad to not kill Ronnet to it being his plan. And so it's like he has to be thinking about Tywin Lannister, and what would Tywin Lannister do? Tywin Lannister would be as ruthless as possible. He would do whatever it takes to win. And JonCon realizes he needs to be more like Tywin Lannister if he's going to win. And if it means killing Ronnet, it means killing Ronnet. And so, and plus this gets into the rumors that Arion heard about Ronnet. About JonCon during the Arion sample chapters, that they've heard that he murdered and his Ronnet's brother and raped his sister. So it's kind of putting those pieces together. And then, how do they even know Ronnet's there? So we needed a letter from his bastard coming to court so that they actually know that Ronnet's there. And then beware wine, which we had the beware wine in the Ariohota chapter. So this has already been established as something that's happening. Beware, the Raven message, which is Jon, beware wine, beware marsh, which will eventually, when we get to the wall, or when we get to the Sam chapters, I think, we'll have the explanation on why this is the message. But the message is closest to being in order with JonCon. It's just he mistakes marsh. He mistakes the march and marsh. So it's really, everything's just a little off, and all the misunderstandings. Words are winds of winter. And then I just kind of thought this was just a kind of grim. Some people are like, "Oh man, I can't believe you just killed this raven." But it's just this idea of Jon Con like just walking over and just stabbing a raven is just kind of a cruel, weird scene that I just kind of liked the idea. And then we get Our Lady Lamore shout out. You know, she needed some page time. It's from the gods. But I also liked adding that John Connington, being a religious guy, like, you know, and I think that this might be something, you know, if the grayscale goes to Connington's head and starts making him insane, that he might become more religious as time goes on, and more delusional as time goes on. So we needed some elements, introduce some elements of his religiousness, and you know, because I don't know, we don't get that many Faith of the Seven people that regularly think about it. I mean, Catelyn thought about it quite a bit, and Brienne thinks about it, and Davos thinks about it, but like, you know, just a little bit. You know, just a little bit. I really feel like a lot of these characters should have more in their beliefs, because none of the Lannisters like believe in it. You know, like none of the Dornish like talk about it. You know, so I feel like if these people really are like religious people that really do believe in God, like God is a central part of their lives, and you know, I think Connington, it should be, if he believes in the Seven, it should be a more central part of his life. But yeah, I felt that like this started him saying that he's starting each day with a jug of bad wine. Like, of course, people are going to gossip about that. So he's going to think that, oh no, they're going to figure out that I have grayscale. So he's going to say no wine for everybody and no wine for himself. So like, if the wine was slowing his grayscale, now it's not going to slow it because he's refusing the wine, which is also pretty dire, you know. And then, you know, tell men to pray to the warrior, like getting just a little more religious. And then he says his own prayer. And then we get a shout out to Melo Jane. And then, yeah, then we get into the real meaning of John the Clever, where he writes his words, and then you find out that he was actually really into poetry. And yeah, you know, some of the editors noted, hey, we can make this kind of similar to Maester John, and so he you know, he kind of goes to the library secretly at night with the candle to read over and read poetry. He has this connection, and then he hands the poem to Rhaegar, and Rhaegar says, honest words, clever, you know. And so yeah, that's I shall set it to music, and then it dies. Now, originally, this was like, you know, I thought it was quite a sad kind of song, like there'd be no more songs for the Silver Prince, only blank parchment and silence. But then it was pointed out to me, like, doesn't Jon Con like hear the bells? Like, he doesn't really hear silence. I was like, oh, that's true. So then we got not silence, worse than silence, clanging. And yeah, we get into more of like, you know, the insanity that he may you know, a lot of people wonder if the bells idea from the end of Game of Thrones was really about Jon Con going nuts and not Daenerys going nuts. So we'll see where it goes. And originally, like when that was added, like, so originally it was no songs for this, no more poems for John Connington, no songs from his Silver Prince, only blank parchment and silence. And then John Connington was staring at his gloved hand. But then then if we change it to the bells and the clanging, it stops being a hand and it becomes a fist. And I really like the shift, because it's like, you know, at some point, like that his anger, you know, caused him to clench his hand into a fist when going through this process. And so then we get Melo Jane and his reference to the 5 golden rings on his arms, because the Golden Company always wears their wealth on them. And he says it's time for battle. And then this is a big thing. He says, take this to Harry and my son. And I like the idea that Connington at this point, even though he tries to go back and starts saying him, I mean, he starts out calling him his son, and he goes back into Prince Aegon and trying to claim that this is Rhaegar's child. But I think, even though he loves Rhaegar and everything, I think it's kind of, I like the idea of JonCon really discovering in the end that he selfishly wants his son on the Iron Throne. That he's been lying to himself and that this is about Rhaegar, but it's really about himself. And that it's his son that he wants to put on the Iron Throne. And his son in the sense that the boy he raised, that it's really about him. I like that idea of where it's going. Because some people say, well, it's Illyrio's son, like it's secretly Illyrio's son, and we're posing it as Rhaegar's son, and it doesn't matter whose son it is. And in the end, like Jon Con spent, a decade raising this kid. Like this kid's his son, So he's gonna. I like the idea that eventually the Rhaegar thing will wash away, and it'll be about um, his love for the boy. What's very funny and weird is we don't know how Jon Con and Aegon lived. We have a lot because we meet them on the boat, and we don't know how long they've been on that boat. Did they live on the boat for like 10 years, or was that boat just recent transportation? It seems like recent transportation, like they don't know Idra and Ysilla. So were they at a house, like a house with a red door, like somewhere, and then they just got on the boat? We don't know much about their lives. I think Vari says something about the closest we really have about their life, which is, I think, he says he like fished with his hands or something. I have to look it up here. It's such a are you called? Let me see here. It's something about, I think there's something about fishing nets being mentioned, but it's like, it's really surprising actually when you think about it. Like, where were they? How did they live? Like, what was their day-to-day life like? I imagine Haldon and Lemore were there, so they should be really good. It says here that all we know about the life was Aegon has shaped him to rule since before he could walk. He's been trained in arms, as befits a knight should be. But that was not the end of his education. He reads and writes, speaks several tongues. He studied history, law, and poetry. A septa has instructed him in the mysteries of the faith since he was old enough to understand them. So at some point about 10 years ago, maybe, Lemore joined them, I guess. He's lived with the fisher folk, worked with his hands. Like, where did he live with fisher folk? Was he always on a boat? Swum in rivers and mended nets and learned to wash his own clothes at need. He can fish and cook and bind a wound. That's essentially all we kind of know about him. But I mean, it's weird. Like the Shy Maids, like, has a room where Haldon lived with like shelves and books and everything in there. So it's like they've been on that boat long enough for him to make that room his own. But I don't know if they've just been living on this houseboat for the whole time, or if that was like they just got on that houseboat because it takes a long time to go down the river, so they've been on it for like a month. It's not established, but eventually we need to establish kind of like what their life was like day to day, and how much instruction and how much fathering Jon Con gave to Aegon, because it was a long time together. But anyway, we hear the signal, the trumpets come down, all eyes will be upon us. This is about Ariane, and that's it. Chapter came out a little longer than I thought it would, but I think it was more emotional and got into Jon Con's head more than I thought it was. So I was really very happy with the chapter, and how it turned out. Turned out better than I thought it would. But anyway, that is me going over the JonCon chapter. Hopefully, I'll try to get Ariane together sometime, and then we'll go on from there. But thank you, everyone, and thanks for thinking this is interesting. If you do, I'll talk to you guys later.